I think trying to figure out why we are the way we are and having a better understanding of ourselves, our behaviors, where we come from, where we might be headed, is one of the most profoundly important and interesting experiences any of us can go through. I just got out of rehab. I've talked about it a lot. I was in a 5-month intensive inpatient program at Treehouse Recovery, and I had the opportunity to learn a lot about myself. The video that you're about to watch is really personal to me. I sit down with my dad. This is from 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and we discussed a lot of different topics about addiction. I challenged him with asking me hard questions, and something that ends up coming up, which is what you're about to see, is me in a healthy way talking to, and you might say confronting him about how his addiction when I was a child impacted the way I thought, the way I attached, the way I behave, and played a role in me becoming an alcoholic, among many other reasons. But it certainly was one of them. And this is something that I learned about in treatment that was deeply painful for me to understand. I fought it, I denied it, I refused it, and I slowly came to terms with it. So when Dad and I are talking in the video you're about to see, he's sort of processing it emotionally for the first time in front of me ever. And it led to a really cathartic and powerful moment that I'm going to share with you now. I think it's really important that I mention that my dad has been sober for nearly 20 years, and he has been an incredible role model for me in recovery and in sobriety and in a lot of other ways. But it doesn't change the fact that when he was in his addiction, he was raising a family, and there are certain consequences of that situation that we talk a little bit about in this video. So I wanted to give you a little heads up that that's what's coming. I hope you are doing well. I hope you know that I am doing very well. My mood is even keel, my outlook is positive, my health is good, and I'm enjoying my sobriety coming up on 6 months. If you need support, if you need help, go get it. Reach your hand out, find that support, and I hope you get something out of this video. He's going to ask me a tough question, and then we're going to slowly worm our way to a pretty powerful and emotional moment together as father and son, both talking about very real things, currently sober together. So enjoy, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
What key reasons can you give to why this time feels different? Because you mentioned you've been in treatment before.
Mm-hmm. It is different as far as I can tell on a day-to-day basis. Certainly one thing that is factually different beyond speculation is the fact that I've been in an inpatient treatment program for 5 months. Being able to objectively look at the fact that this treatment program has been longer and different and how they outline it, or how it's laid out, is important because I can't deny that. And the other thing is I've never done the type of personal work to understand how trauma impacts addictive behavior at all. I was among a massive cohort of people that saw trauma as a very specific, what they would refer to as an overt trauma sort of understanding. The military veteran who comes back from war hears a loud noise. They're triggered. PTSD. Yeah. And so there's covert trauma, and that was more where I lived as a child, and understanding how that sort of trauma and what...
Explain some examples of covert trauma.
Neglect. It could just be simply neglect. I was raised by 2 parents that happened to be in their own disease.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that really broke me down emotionally was understanding that that to be raised by 2 well-meaning parents, right, to separate the person from the disease, but to be raised by 2 people that were in their own addictions meant that they couldn't be entirely, if at all, emotionally available in the evenings for me. And the way that finally cracked, the way that shell cracked for me was when my counselor, his name is Billy Grande, life-changing man. He asked me how emotionally available I was for Jesse when I was in my disease. And my answer was 0, the way I was. I drank almost every single night to absolute oblivion. You cannot be interpersonally attuned or connected to anyone in that state. It just doesn't happen. The front of the brain, the 9 functions of your prefrontal cortex, we learn about that stuff. They go down to almost no functioning. And that's why we regress into childlike behavior. So I think digging into my childhood and having things put in my face that I couldn't deny and being made to really experience them was one of the main things. At this particular treatment plan, there was 5 of us on the team, 6. I've been to other rehabs, they're 30, 35. You can skate by in those other programs, and I really couldn't hear. So I was either forced to walk out the door or look at my life for what it was and have a chance to come to terms with it. And once I was in there and burned off the withdrawals enough, about a month in, the feelings came back, the thoughts came back, and some new realities came into my mind. And one of the biggest ones was that that I was set up in certain ways with a genetic predisposition, but also with some childhood trauma that was going to cause me to seek comfort and soothing, like so many people do. And what helped me logically separate the two was getting rid of feelings about you. and mom, and separating you being good people was just understanding from a developmental perspective, it is not healthy for a child to be raised by active addicts and alcoholics. Period.
Yeah.
And then they presented more information about that, and I started seeing my behavior as a kid and all of the formal, documented evidence. And that really blew my mind. And then the last thing I want to share in terms of what made it different, that sort of led to an emotional awakening for me, that led to tears that I didn't know I had, was the understanding that relapse was a predictable process. I mean, but really coming to terms with that, because my fear and my thought, very irrational, but my thought was that relapse in general had been just biting me randomly on the ass since I was 19 years old. So my confidence and my interest in getting sober was waning over the years, because
it was hopeless.
It was hopeless, because no matter how hard I thought I was trying, I would get sober, life would get better, and before I knew it, I would have a drink in my hand. And going through the counseling, going through the addiction education portion, and of course still reading the big book and doing a lot of more traditional 12-step based stuff, I was able to realize that it could be different. Here's why, and understand that it was predictable, and the reasons I relapsed were more obvious than I thought.
That's powerful.
That's
powerful. Knowledge empowering you, and then so I was one of the parents who was in my own addiction. I was pretty good during the day, but you're absolutely right. I've always known this. At night, after a certain time, I was unavailable. And I remember making amends to your older sister, to Natalie, and she said, "Well, Dad, who do you think took care of the kids while you were passed out?"
That's tough,
right? And I knew that was a real thing. So,
and I was vibrating mad when they brought this up to me. When the counselor brought up saying, "Hey, this happened. It shouldn't have happened.
Right?
You were affected." And this is how it's played out in your life with your behavior, with your deflection, with your maladaptive behaviors, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's all these things that definitely developed in my wiring as a kid. They weren't your fault.
Right.
And it doesn't mean your parents are bad people. But when they would bring it up, I would get angry. Very activated.
You had idolized us.
100%. And I couldn't separate the two. And so when he was suggesting that, hey, these choices impacted you, it's not that we need to judge the people who made those choices. They were in their own addiction, but they impacted you. And if you don't address how they've impacted you, you will repeat these cycles until infinitum, until you end up in a jail, in an institution, or dead. And I was so mad because I thought he was attacking you. I thought he was attacking Mom, and I didn't think that was fair. And I wouldn't give myself a second to just breathe and to feel sad for that part of my childhood that shouldn't have been that way.
I am deeply sorry for my role in not being with you and for you at nighttime when I should have been.
Thank you.
I love you.
I love you. I love you too.
I don't know how you do amends, but I feel deeply for whatever our spirits have to solve and heal, that we'll do the work.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to do the work.
Oh, yeah.
Love you, son.
I love you too.